back at Investor Channel's headquarters in San Diego, California. I'm your host, Daniel Wong. On today's program, we have CEO of Bootstrap Legal and a leading ICO authority, Amy Wan, on the show with us. Amy, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Amy, it's always a pleasure to talk with you and meet with you. And I know you are really out there helping companies understand how these ICO offerings work as well as investors. But first, let's start off with, what is Bootstrap Legal?
Sure. So Bootstrap Legal is a legal technology company. We are building out the legal tech solutions for tomorrow. So on one hand, we have a product that actually automates the drafting of real estate, private equity funds, and crowdfunding campaigns. And a new project that we're working on now is a solution that actually allows for parties who are entering into smart contracts to be able to resolve their disputes. So kind of a safety net or a freeze button for smart contracts.
Okay, so speaking of smart contracts and that service you're going to offer, we were just talking not too long about the vulnerability of smart contracts. Tell us about that. I mean, the applications. We've seen some examples of that already with the Dow and some other companies. Talk to us about that and why it's so important for companies.
Yeah, so it's kind of, just like the perfect attorney cannot sit there and guarantee that they're going to write you a disputeless English contract. It's very difficult for a coder or a developer, even if they're the best in the world, to sit there and guarantee you that all the smart contracts they're going to produce are going to be errorless and dispute-free, right? So from what I've seen, what my CTO has seen, there are a number of vulnerabilities with smart contracts. You've got coding errors. You've got, vulnerabilities in the code. Generally, the more complex code is, the more vulnerabilities there will be. So, for example, the Dow, right? That was a $50-60 million hack, not against the terms of the smart contract, but against the intent of the smart contract. And then, at the end of the day, the truth is that human beings are very creative. They will find loopholes. And they're also fickle. Situations change, people change, and people will need to modify, amend, or terminate execution of their smart contracts. So what we're really doing there is we're building one line of code, an SDK, that anyone can put into their smart contract. To the extent a dispute ever arises, they would trigger that one line of code that would freeze execution of the smart contract, kick the entire thing over into a dispute resolution marketplace, and then the entire thing, for a lot of logistical and cultural reasons, sits on top of a borderless digital jurisdiction, because there are a lot of logistical barriers to actually even being able to bring one of these disputes into a traditional courtroom.
What an amazing problem you're solving. It's genius that you're doing that. Now, you said something that I'd like to kind of go back to. You said that it's not the smart contract, but the intent of the smart contract. Can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit, maybe?
Sure. So, for example, a lot of the times when two parties sit down to enter into an agreement, what may matter more than the actual agreement themselves is the intent for which they're entering into that agreement, right? And so if you look at an example like the Dow, right? Someone executed a hack against the Dow that, drained the Dow $50-60 million of funds. It didn't violate the terms, but in law, we have this concept called equity. Equity essentially means fairness, right? If you had taken the Dow dispute and put that in front of a judge, it probably only would have lasted 30 seconds. The judge would have instantly recognized, hey, this is not what the parties intended, even though what they did wasn't against the terms of the contract. You have to give the money back. And now we're continuing to see more and more examples where, smart contracts have failed, right? Parity wallet hack 1, parity wallet hack 2. During the summer, a lot of ICOs would get hacked, and, hackers would take $2 to $3 million away in the first 15 minutes of that ICO's fundraising campaign. And a lot of the times the founders would just sit there and shrug their shoulders, and there really wasn't much that they could do. So this is the problem we're trying to solve, right? Because, technology can solve a lot of problems, but it can't solve everything. And sometimes you do need dispute resolution, and computers may not be able to make that judgment.
And it's such new territory. I mean, we're really just navigating our ways through it, and obviously we're seeing the hiccups that are involved in the technology, because the technology can actually cause problems, which is what we're seeing now as well. So
Yeah.
speaking of that, now let's go into a lot of investors. We're seeing a lot of ICOs out there. We're saying, what should they be aware of? We just saw the Plexcoin announcement. That's definitely something that investors are now going to be a little scared about. And what can give them the confidence to do their own due diligence or figure out a way to make sure they don't get involved in something like that?
Sure. So investors should definitely do their own due diligence, right? I think in the early days in the summer, a lot of people were looking at signals from whales, from crypto influencers in making their investment decisions. I think a lot of that has changed in the past, 60 to 90 days. What you're starting to see more is people actually scrutinizing things, right? So they're scrutinizing the white paper. Is the technology even possible or feasible? They're scrutinizing the team, right? So, for example, Plexcore, the scam that you mentioned earlier, when they actually went and did their ICO, they didn't even disclose who was behind the actual offering, mostly because they were actually trying to conceal that it's these, these bad actors who have tried to defraud investors many times. So you will want to scrutinize that, and you also want to look at hey, do these people have a track record of producing things, of being able to execute? Are they really newbies in their space? Are they entering an industry in which they don't even have any real world or practical experience, for example? Like if you're doing a VR thing, hopefully you would have some experience or know something about VR. What I tell a lot of people is you should due diligence ICOs the same way that you would due diligence a startup, right? Founding team, ability to execute, how reputable are these people?
I think that's a great point you make. It's just like any other investment. You got to check it out. You got to figure out, are these people hiding behind something? Why should I invest in this? Where's the confidence in this? I mean, that's definitely very interesting to think of. There's been this big hoopla about, just get in ICOs and you'll make a bunch of money, but what's actually going to help that, and what you should be careful of before you just jump, both feet in first. So that's a great point you make. For other companies that are looking to do ICOs, what should they be aware of? What should they be doing?
Yeah, so there's definitely best practices that people can look at. So, for example, something I really like to talk about is token economics and token governance, right? So, to the extent that a company is going out to tokenize, and to the extent investors looking at it, make sure the token economics makes sense. And sometimes it's not immediately apparent or clear, but there are signs that show you that things are way off. Like, for example, I think 2 weeks ago, there was a whale who was telling me that he wanted to invest in ICO. And then when he actually sat down to crunch the numbers, he realized that this pre-concept, pre-product, pre-traction ICO was asking for a $2.8 billion market cap. That's more than the GDP of a lot of countries and public companies. So I'm not quite sure how the company would justify that. So make sure, for example, that the valuation or the market cap actually makes sense, right? And then on the other topic, token governance, a lot of these ICOs are coming out pre-product, pre-concept, pre-traction, and raising, $200 million for their entire thing. And that's not something you would ever see a startup do. So really, maybe a company might stage their ICO out in phases, right, to mitigate or decrease risk. Or maybe they put in milestones, and to the extent that they don't meet those milestones, they have to return funds to investors.
Should investors be aware of those really large, offerings? Because it can be so much more manipulated by the people that are getting discounts to the market, because you have these whales coming in investing, and of course they're going to incentivize them. Is that something investors might want to look out for?
I definitely think so. So, like I was saying earlier, in the early days in summer, a lot of interesting things were happening. And I think you definitely saw a lot of whales or early investors getting massive discounts for investing so that the ICO could brag that they invested. But the ICOs were also promising, very short-term liquidity. So essentially what you saw happening was these investors would get, massive, sometimes even 90% discounts. And then the ICO would go sell to the public. The tokens would start trading. They would dump all of their tokens. The crowd would be buying it at, 100% or presumably somewhere around that. The whale would essentially be getting a free investment. What it really means is that these early investors who are getting massive discounts don't actually even need to believe in the project because they're really getting a free investment. What I think investors should be looking out for is to make sure that everyone, the ICO founders, the project itself, the early stage investors, that everyone is aligned, right? That you don't see these pump and dump schemes going on. In fact, I would actually argue that the more, celebrity glitz and glamour, the more they've got, these Hollywood celebrities or whatever people involved, or I don't know, maybe they have a booth and they've got, models there that look like import car models. Like, that's the kind of stuff I would stay away from.
That's a great point. That reminds me, it's kind of like the convertible debt deals where, these companies go public and they've got convertible debt at these 90%, discount rates to the market that are convertible in these different blocks. It's the same thing, they're just doing it in the ICOs. I mean, that's a great point you make there, Amy. But Amy, it looks like we're about out of time for today, but we wanted to thank the CEO of Bootstrap Legal and leading authority and speaker out there, Amy Wan. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, folks, that was Amy Wan, again, CEO of Bootstrap Legal. If you want to find out more information about Amy or her services and what she's providing, go to bootstraplegal.com. Follow us on Facebook there, like us or follow us on Twitter, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much. Stay tuned for the next interviews here on investortownhall.com.